This episode is completely dedicated to the IPL 2022, which has been going for around a week and has already seen 10 exciting matches. There's a lot to talk about, including current table positions, standout performances, including 100 by a certain Joss Butler and other beginnings, as well as tactics on show. Without further ado, let's get started. I think we'll start with the current table. It's actually looking pretty interesting. It's not what you expect from an IPL table so early into the innings. You'd expect to see somewhere like CSK up top, Mumbai Indians also up top, but they are known for starting pretty slow. The most standout thing for me when I look at this table is that CSK and Mumbai Indians are both in the bottom three, along with Sunrisers Hyderabad, who are normally in the bottom three. They're generally in the bottom three. But Zaid, what is that? What do you think that tells us about the season? And do you think it's going to be less like a traditional season where you've got like the two big giants, battling out for the top place?
Yeah, definitely. It's quite surprising that we've seen the two probably most successful teams in the IPL. They're at the bottom this year, and obviously it's just the beginning. But I think with all the addition of the two new teams and with the IPL mega auction, I think the teams are really changed from previous seasons. Normally, I think we see the teams they don't change too much throughout the season, especially a team like CSK and Mumbai Indians who like to keep their base strong. But this year, the teams have changed completely, especially with the addition of two new teams. So um, I think CSK Mumbai Indians they'll need to try something different now because I think they've got different teams definitely, and I don't think it's going to be the same CSK Mumbai Indians at the top this year, and especially in the future as well because I think there's going to be some new teams coming into the top. Something like Rajasthan Royals, they've got pretty good teams this year, or Gujarat Titans and Lucknow Super Giants. These are pretty good teams, and I just think it's not going to be the traditional IPL now. I think it's opened up much more, and there's going to be much more interesting competition, and I think it's going to be a new winner this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's pretty clear that there's a lot of a big shuffle. It's just you don't see the typical Mumbai Indian CSK dominating. And there's been a lot of strong batting performances. And for Mumbai Indians especially, I think they look pretty lost without Trent Bolt and Jasprit Bumrah bowling up front. They've just got Jasprit Bumrah, and they've struggled, and they've put people like Nathan Coulter now and some other pace Indian pace bowlers, but it just doesn't have the same effect as Jasprit Bumrah and Trent Bolt, who were pretty effective in the last couple of seasons, and they haven't had as much control over matches as they had before. Like you can see that before, it'll be a very rare occasion where they go, where teams score more than 200 against them. But now it's sort of like, I can see by the reaction, like Rohit Sharma, that, it's just sort of like fate in a way. They've just become like a mid-table team now, which is really worrying. But like, obviously they've still got another 12 matches to play, which means there's a lot more points to play for. So there's nothing to worry about too much. How about CSK? What do you think is like the main reason why they're struggling at the moment?
Well, I don't think they've done much wrong so far. I just think in the first game, I think like Moeen Ali he didn't play. Uh, I think a couple of players that just weren't available. So I don't think that was the strongest CSK team there. And obviously their batting kind of misfired, but I think that always happens once in a tournament at least. So I don't think they've done much wrong. And in the second game, batting was completely okay. They got 210 or so, and still lost the game, which was quite a shame, really. I think it was really because of a bit of tactics from Jadeja, really, and also the due factor, because that's just really really annoying for the second team that plays in a evening game. But as a whole, I don't think CSK have done too badly. I just think they've been a little bit unlucky at times, and I think obviously we've got a lot of games to come, 12 games. So I don't think CSK have done too badly. It's just a couple of minor changes they need to do, and I think they'll improve much more.
Yeah, I think that the second game, so that's CSK versus Lucknow Super Giants. Jadeja's captaincy was like questioned due to like a one incident, which was him deciding to bowl Shivam Dube for the 19th over against Lucknow. So Lucknow were batting and needed 34 off 12 before the 19th over. Once the 19th over had finished, it was a pretty disastrous over. They only needed 9 off 6, and that just gives nothing for there was literally no platform for the 20th, the person bowling the 20th over to defend upon, because they leaked so many runs and they just did not have any options. it was honestly it was pretty much a horrible over from the start. It was too wide. There's a couple four sixes, and you obviously could blame the bowler. You could say, Shivam Dube shouldn't have bowled, shouldn't have bowled the lengths that he did. He shouldn't have bowled the wide. Just putting more pressure onto himself. But it's also a question on the captain. Do you not agree? Do you think how much do you think it's the captain's fault?
Yeah, definitely. Like Jadeja is really to blame there, but I don't think Jadeja he's new to captaincy, and I haven't seen him captain anywhere else. So I think it is difficult to start new as a fresh captain, especially considering you've got Dhoni in your team, who's been captain for many years, and especially for the Indian team, has been amazing captain. So I think Jadeja kind of in that game kind of just used up his bowlers too early because he needs to save. I think in the next game when they're in a situation like that, I think he needs to save some a couple of good bowlers until the end, like not right at the end, but in that 19th over, that's probably the most important over. You bowl a bowler that's not bowled at all in the whole game. Like maybe Shivam Dube could bowl the last over, or maybe bowling a bit earlier. There's plenty of options, but I think that was a poor decision to bowl Shivam Dube. A new bowler hasn't bowled at all in 90th over, which is probably the most important over that probably decides the game, which is exactly what happened. So I think today he's got a little bit of pressure on himself, and I don't think he's questionable. I think I'd rather have Dhoni as captain, but obviously that's his decision. And I think they don't really have anyone else to really go as captain. So I think Jadeja, he's doing okay. It's just a couple of minor decisions that can change the tide of a game.
Yeah, I think he's sort of like moving. Is just keeping the position, just getting some experience, and then waiting for Gaikwad to get a bit more experience and get a bit more consistency in terms of IPL scoring, and then sort of mold him into a captain, and he could be a future India captain as well. Because obviously, a lot of captains for IPL teams, especially if they're Indian, go on to have it gives them a good experience of being captain in the real in the actual India team. So that could be a possibility, I think. But I still just think that generally Jadeja did not plan enough he didn't set a clear plan for the death overs because they had a lot of runs on the board. You should be come on, if you can't defend 210, then even if you then that's not the baseline score. That's actually a really big score. A typical T20 score in the IPL that's defendable is like 170. So 210 is just crazy. Like it's a lot of runs, but they still couldn't defend it, and that's just a bit worrying considering there's going to be a lot of other teams who will be able to chase down scores like 170, 180, and if CSK score a lower score, they're not going to score 210 every match. Then it could be a bit of a problem. But yeah, that isn't the end of the world for CSK. It's not that bad. At the top of the table, we actually have Rajasthan Royals at number top because primarily due to their win recently, and Kolkata Knight Riders second, Gujarat Titans three, DC Delhi Capitals four. Yeah, so that's your top four. Rajasthan Royals generally occupying the lower positions of the table last season now have been revolutionised and won the first two on the trot. Won them pretty convincingly as well. How do you think their prospects lie for the end of for this whole IPL?
Yeah, definitely. I think Rajasthan, they're looking very strong. Like they've definitely in the auction, they made some wise decisions. They've definitely improved their bowling. And when I looked at the playing 11 for yesterday, for example, it looked like their batting looked a bit light. I think there was only 6 or 7 batsmen that could really bat. And in the IPL, we've often seen teams they have batsmen until 8, 9, sometimes even number 10 can even bat a little bit. So I think the thing is though, Rajasthan they've got their top 6 is looking very strong. Josh Butler at the top, Jaiswal is looking pretty solid. Samson, incredible player. They've got Hetmeyer. So I think I don't think that's a big issue for Rajasthan. I think they're doing really well, and I think just this year they've really improved their bowling. Especially their spin attack with Ashwin and Chahal. They've got great spin options. They've got Trent. They've got Trent Bolt in their team. Navdeep Saini. So they've got loads of options, and they've got a much stronger team. So I think this year they're going to do really well. And I think they're a contender to get into that final and maybe even win it.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on the light on the batting. They do look quite light. after seven, there's pretty much no batting, and that is a bit worrying because if as you go along into the season, it's not just going to be games where you smash it out of the park. If there's a pitch that you're struggling on, or the bowlers are beating you, you've got to be able to bat long and at least finish the 20 overs and get a respectable score on the total. But it could be a question of like, they could be struggling to get that because with a lack of batting, if wickets fall quickly, there's not enough people to pick it up and push it up to a decent total. So that could be worrying. But yeah, their bowling department looks really well, and it's sort of shown like the CSK's match case look now. It's just sort of showing that regardless of batting, because it's 20 over format, because you've got such good players in all teams, even if you score huge total, it's the bowlers that have got to control it and give you the win. Without a decent bowling attack, you're not going to win, and that's really important. And I think this IPL has made it even more important. I think because of the matches that we've had so far. But yeah, now I think we should go on to like good performances. So we've seen actually quite a few in the last like considering it's 10 matches, there's been at least 10 good performances. But we've picked a couple. For me, I think obviously you had Josh Butler's century, but for me, I still think Shubman Gill's 84-46, I think was yesterday. It was a match-winning score. Shubman Gill, he's a really good player. Like I don't think anyone's going to doubt that, but he hasn't really had the best of performances for India. He played for the India Test team for a while. He scored a few 50s. His technique was decent, but he just got out really cheaply most of the time. But he scored very quick. He scored at a very good pace for an opener, and that's what impressed me. What do you feel about Shubman Gill today? Do you think a good IPL is going to sort of kickstart his international career?
Definitely, he's a young player, so I don't think it's a huge worry that he's not doing too well in international cricket yet. Because I think if he's obviously that innings 84-46 is excellent innings there, and he kind of just needs to improve his consistency a bit more. But that will come with time and experience. He's still young, and I think if he gets a good IPL this year, that'll definitely bring him that much more confidence. And also, he's around some really good players. He's been around for a while. And when he plays in that Indian setup and gets into the team and plays matches against top teams in the world, then that also broadens his experience in other countries against other solid players. So I think a good IPL season will definitely kickstart his career even more. And he's a very promising young talent, and he's got a huge future ahead of him. And I think this 84-46 is kind of like looking into the future really, and I think he's going to do really well.
Mm. Yeah, I just think that he needs to be given a opening spot consistently. For Gujarat Titans, he just needs to have, if they keep him and give him that spot, then I think he will repay back the confidence in him with some big scores. So he's looking pretty good. And I've seen him play Test cricket. I'm not sure if he's played ODI T20 for India, but nevertheless, he's looking like his technique and his shots show he's a pretty good batsman. He's just got to get more experience under his belt. uh, Obviously, I did mention the Josh Butler century. It was 168, and it was a pretty typical Butler fashion. It wasn't just over. It wasn't over the top smashing like Chris Gale type, just sixes everywhere. It was more just there's a lot of placement and just all round 360 degrees hitting. What are your targets? If you were Josh Butler, what would your target be for this season, Zane? What would you think your main targets would be?
Yeah, so I think for Butler, he's probably main target stay as the opener. Because I think a
Mm,
couple of seasons ago we saw that Ben Stokes he managed to open the batting and Butler was at 5 or 6, which I would completely disagree with. I think Butler is definitely an opening batsman, and the way he just plays, it's not brute force. It's more like placing the gaps, scooping, ramping, whatever. And he just kind of like he doesn't hit the ball too hard. He kind of just hits it with some pure technique and class, which is why I really love watching him. Some players are just whack the ball everywhere, and yes, they score runs, but it doesn't really look very nice. And I think Butler's not one of those players. He's one of those players that looks really good when he plays, and he looks really solid. And I just think this season he just needs to continue what he did there, 168, and just keep that going. And if he can do that, then Rajasthan Royals will look in a really strong position because Butler he can accelerate when he needs to. That's not a huge issue. The issue is can he continue on for a very long time? We don't want him, getting out for like 20 or 8 balls. That's not what we want. We want to see him going big scores 50, 60, getting up to 100 if he can. So I think his main target probably going to be to stay at the top and continue what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think he needs to be continuously given that that opening role, and his ability to bat through the innings as well. He managed to bat for, I think it was a good part of at least 15, 16 overs. And he's not that type of opener who'll score a quick 50 off like 25 and just get out after 10 or after 8 overs. So that's really important because he's like that glue of the team. In other formats like Test cricket, ODI, you'd expect like a three number four batsman to do that. But in T20, I think you just got to give every batter except for the openers just got to have free license to hit if the openers have done a good role, because then it just allows one person to be in there scoring runs and then the other person's to just and other people to aggress. So they've got a good thing going on at Rajasthan. You know, they're scoring runs, they're scoring at like 10 runs and over. Uh, they're limiting their bats. Overall, they've limited their two teams they play to an average of 8 runs and over. So they're doing well. They just got to keep it up, and they could also be a title challenger. And that just shows how open the IPL is. It's just ridiculously open. This anyone can score, anyone can win. Yeah. In terms of bowling, any standout performances for you so far in the 10-match series? There are a lot. Sorry, 10 matches so far in the IPL.
Yeah, so definitely one to look out for is Umesh Yadav. He's been doing absolutely amazing so far. You know, his line and length, opening the ball, and I mean, we haven't really seen him too much in the Indian team. I think there was a period a couple of years ago where he was playing, but currently he's not really in that team, and I really want to see him in the Indian team because this bowling it just shows like the amount of experience he has and the amount of talent he has. Because he's I think he's leading the. He's got 8 wickets so far, an average of like 7 or 8, and I just think his bowling, he's completely dominating the IPL so far. He played what 3 games, 2 games or something. And it's just really good, you know, line and length and just excellent swing bowling. And it's almost like test cricket, you know, you get the ball up there and you get the batsman playing and you edge it to slip or wicket keeper or something. And I think Umesh Yadav, he needs to do this more consistently and so that he can continue breaking into the Indian setup and then play even more.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's coming towards. I think he's coming towards the end of his career. In terms of internationally, I think he's like I'm not sure how old he is. I think he's like 30, 34. Oh god, he's 34. So he hasn't got forever, but he's bowling at a really quick pace still. He's known for he's a pretty quick bowler, but he's really consistent. And I think he has at least another 2, 3 years. But he's got to make the most of it. You know, get a few more IPL India international caps. But even just playing in the IPL, you know, he's been so effective, and he's been a really good buy. And I'm just surprised, you know, I haven't seen him bowl. He obviously bowls at India, and in Test cricket, he's never like your opening bowler. He's normally like your second change. So he hasn't been used too much by India. So I think he's fresh and he's ready. And I think even if he just performs well in the IPL, he'll just do him really well. He could easily go for 20, 25 wickets this season, or even more because it's 14 games plus, you know, the if you go qualify eliminator and stuff like that. So, you know, he could aim for 30 wickets this season, which would be you know, a standout season for him. Yeah, I would say also obviously I'm a Sri Lanka fan, so when they do Hasaranga appeal, it's 100%. You know, for me, just seeing him go for so much money, it was like I'm not sure how many crore it was. I think it's like 11 crore, which is such a huge amount of money for a Sri Lankan player in general, because like, you know, they're not too pronounced in the IPL. You haven't seen too many amazing Sri Lankan players in the IPL, so especially recently. So that's really good, and he 100% repaid the faith in him. I think he batted at like 6. He scored 4 off 3. But regardless of that, his bowling is where most people play him for his bowling, and he actually bowled 4 for 20 off 4 overs, which it was really well bowled. It was honestly, it was like he showed he's really good in the T20 internationals that Sri Lanka have played, but he hasn't done it on the stage at IPL, which is a completely different thing, where you're playing against really good players of all countries. So the fact that he's taken 4 wickets, it's just been really impressive, and I think he's gonna have a really good IPL season, and he could be challenging among players like Rashid Khan and Chahal for the you know, the highest wicket taker for spinners as well. You know, just generally leg spinners are taking the most wickets, but you know, you got 3 really good leg spinners who all 3 are probably challenging for, you know, the most wickets for a spinner. But yeah, for more for more standout performances and things like this, we do like an IPL weekly roundup on the Completely Cricket website. and it'll be linked below. And there's an article that it will release every Sunday alongside the podcast. So you can have a read of that, and it has things like terrible tactics, for example. It has stand-up performances, a summary of matches, just so you can, if you haven't followed, most people haven't watched every single IPL match. It's just too many now. It's just a quick summary of everything, and yeah, it should be good. Next part of our IPL episode is tactics, and Zaid, you mentioned the due factor before. Can you go into more detail about how it's affecting, the IPL as of yet, and instances where you've seen it?
Yeah, so with the dew, we see dew probably comes in a game in the evening, sort of in India especially. And what happens? The ball becomes really wet, and it's really difficult for especially spinners to grip that ball and to get the revs on it and spin the ball. It's really difficult with the wet ball, slippery ball. It's really really difficult, and they do have good quality ball. If we play club cricket, we're not going to have the best balls. But in IPL, they have pretty good balls. Even then it's still made pretty difficult. The ball gets really wet, and especially when you're the team bowling second, I think it's just a bit unfair on the bowlers, really. Especially we saw in the CSK versus Lucknow game. The CSK they managed to score really good 210 or something runs, and they still lost, which is I think a due was definitely a factor of that. Because like it's just Jadeja and Moeen Ali, they bowled a bit in the middle and they just got whacked, and there was a few wides as well. And I think that was just because of the dew. It's just really difficult to grip the ball. And I think they just stopped the spin after that. And then we had the problem with Shivam Dubey in the 19th over. And then I think just think with the due factor, there's something, I don't know what, but there's going to be something, there's going to be some talk about it, because if this continues, it's just not going to be very fun watching cricket, because it's just going to be really boring, and it's just going to be unfair on the bowlers bowling second. Because at the moment, it's literally like whoever in an evening game, whoever wins the toss is going to is going to bowl first, because they don't have to face that due factor. So I think something's going to be done about it, and if not, then it's just going to be a boring game.
Yeah, I agree, because all the IPL teams generally have a balance of around like 3 to 4 paces and maybe 2 spinners. So obviously, if those 2 spinners have just been rendered useless because of due, and then there's just obviously then it's just gonna be stems getting smashed. And also spinners generally don't really bowl many wides in the IPL, just because there's not they have enough control over the ball usually. It's normally the pacers who you see who bowl wides, but considering the spinners are bowling wides, this is a bit of an issue. And I think I saw something. I'm not sure if it's still true, but the first few matches, everyone was bowling first, primarily. I'm assuming due to the due, because if you bowl first, you can have a lot more control of the ball. As the second innings, as you said, it's gonna have a lot more due, and that is worrying, because it's just generally putting the second team at a complete disadvantage. But we'll go on and see. At the moment, there's CSK versus Look Now is like one big case of it. If there's more, then there might be an issue on it. But how would you combat that though? Like, what's the reality? Like, how are you supposed to do anything about the due? I don't really understand. What do you think you do?
No, I think we just maybe move as many games as possible into the afternoon, because in the weekdays we're seeing most games in the evening. I guess that's probably because people have to go to work and school, and they want to make sure people are watching it. But if this continues, it's just I don't know. It's really difficult, because you want to have the evening game for everyone. It's just everyone's able to watch it. But the issue is, and if you do it in the weekday, if you do it in the afternoon, then firstly there's no due, so it's a much more interesting game. But there's two issues with that, I think, because firstly you have it's really hot in India, and that's just going to be really difficult for the cricketers. But even more so, there's going to be less fans enjoying the cricket, because they're all going to be busy at work and everything. But I think one thing they could try is maybe instead of having the game at I think 7:30 or something in Indian time, maybe have it at like 5 or 4, because then people can still watch it, and then there's less problem with the Jews. So I think that's something to try. But then I don't really know what can be done. It's definitely something that they need to talk about if this continues even more.
Yeah, and also, with Sky Sports having the rights for, I think just for England fans in England as well. If it was earlier, then there's not going to be many English fans of the IPL watching. There will still be some, but there'll be like more hardcore fans. There's not going to be people casually like cricket just flicking on and watching, because it's not the right time. Like midday around 2 3 p.m. as well. They're good timing for matches. But obviously, for the Indian players, it's gonna just it's sort of messing up. It just depends on what you really want, isn't it? Like, would you be willing to risk players suffering from the heat, being tired more, but then also get the dew, just getting rid of the dew as a factor? I think they're gonna probably keep it how it is. I think it's okay, but it really depends on the amount of impact that the dew has. Also, in tactics, we also saw. I think Zaidi hinted at it, but it was CSK versus Lucknow. Ravindra Jadeja bowling Shivam Dube at the 19th over. Yeah, that was just strange, honestly. But that's pretty much it for tactics. But in terms of just general IPL stuff, I wanted to mention it because I found it pretty funny. But in the Rahul, I can't remember what match it was, but he was running between the wickets and his shoe just completely fell off, which was just strange. But yeah, I don't really know. That was just the strange thing that happened. Also, another weird thing was it was I can't remember. Do you know what team Arvish Khan is in? Because I can't remember what team is his team.
He might be in Delhi, I think.
Is
He
he
was
still in
definitely in
Delhi?
Delhi before.
He was in Delhi before. Well, a certain team, I can't remember who they were. They were about to bowl, and some reason they spent like 10 minutes. Oh no, this is the same team as Rahul. So that's Lucknow, isn't it? Yeah, Lucknow Super Giants. Yeah, they were basically fretting about the ball. Apparently they didn't want the yeah, they didn't like the shape of the ball. Apparently, I don't think it was hard enough or something like that. It was really strange because they spent like 5 or 10 minutes, deciding. I think even before one ball was bowled, they wanted a new ball. They wanted to swap the ball off, and then they tried like 3 or 4 different balls, and it was like and Arvish Khan was like, I think, was complaining about like when he felt it, and because obviously it's really important for the bowler. They get the perfect ball because if it's not comfortable for them, or if it's like less hard, or something, it could like really impact the amount of runs scored by the batters. But yeah, that was just really weird. I just did not know why that happened. And there was at least a 10-minute delay, and that same delay happened a little bit later in the match because apparently they wanted to swap the ball again. But yeah, um, lastly on the IPL segment of this episode is predictions. So Zaid, what do you predict in terms of this IPL? Who do you think is going to be the winner and why?
So I think I have a feeling my just gut feeling tells me it's going to be Rajasthan Royals because I think they've done so well so far. They've done really well. They beat Sunrisers quite convincingly there by 60 odd runs, and they had like a very good net run rate. And then they beat Mumbai Indians recently as well. So they've been doing really well. I think this team this year, the squad in general for Rajasthan is just really good. Like compared to other years, they've got a much better spin attack. The batting is a bit light, but I think that's not really hasn't been a problem so far, and it's just something to look out for in the future, really. And I think we'll be seeing if that pays off. With more bowling and less batting, we'll see if it pays off later in the IPL. We'll see. I just think they're just all round performance. The all round players. They've got Ravi Ashwin, they've got Chahal, Trent Bolt, Josh Butler. Just to name a few, they've got plenty of players. So I think so far they've had a really convincing, really dominating start to the IPL, and I think they're definitely a contender to win.
Yeah, for me, I'm still gonna stick with Lucknow Super Giants. Anyone who's watched the previous episodes knows I'm a Lucknow Super Giants fan. Just what I've always been a Mumbai Indians fan, but to me, I don't know why this season Lucknow Super Giants looking strongest. They stole Quinton de Kock from Mumbai Indians, and they've got a keeping batting top order. They've got a strong batting order. They've shown that they can even chase down the biggest of totals that a strong team like Chennai set them, which was like 210 or something. They've got batting depth. They can bowl as well. It's just generally looking really good for them. And they are fifth at the moment. That's just purely because they've won one and lost one. But as the season goes, as they win more matches, I think they'll 100% be in the fold to win for the IPL. And yeah, who do you think is going to be your highest wicket taker for the season? Then that's also really important.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I think contenders probably Umesh Yadav. We talked about him. He's doing really well. I think someone that everyone knows, Rashid Khan. I think he hasn't fired completely yet. This IPL, but it's just a start. He did really play 2 games, so they've got time. I think Rashid Khan definitely. I think something like one in Hasaranga definitely. I think the spin is going to do really well this season. Hoping that the dew isn't going to cause a huge problem. If that it doesn't cause a huge problem, then I think spinners will definitely have a great IPL this year. You know, players like Chahal did really well, just missed a hat trick. Um, who just missed a hat trick recently, and players like Rashid Khan, Wendy Hastaranga, these sorts of players, I think they're gonna be quite high up there. So, and also opening bowlers such as Bumrah has been someone for a while really, and Umesh Yadav. So these sorts of bowlers, I think, are definitely going to be contenders to win. But I think it's really difficult to say at this stage who's going to be the top leading wicket taker.
Yeah, it's pretty early, but for me, I think it's going to be less pacers, more spinners, because pacers haven't really been that consistent in general. This is like a really general statement because obviously you have had consistent pace bowlers, but in general, the pace bowlers that we've seen bowling quite expensively, quite wide as well. There's been a lot of wide balls and extras, so spinners have looked like they've got the control that the pacers haven't really had. Obviously, there is the due, and then in the second innings they haven't been as effective and they've been leaking loads of runs. But that's just hopefully that's just an isolated incident that it's not consistent. But I'm hoping for Wanendu Hasaranga, going first. What main like this could be his breakthrough IPL season, and this could really propel him to like the top of international cricket, which is good. I think he is the top, one of the best T20 bowlers, but like just in ODI and Test as well, that could give him the platform to be the best in all formats. Any players specifically that you'd say is like a they could be discovered as a talent for India? So this is like a homegrown player specifically. Anyone who has recently been signed to an IPL team and that you think could light up this IPL and push himself for a case in India's international team?
I think someone like Gaikwad, I know he had an amazing season last year. I'm really a big fan of Gaikwad. I just think he's kind of already showed her. He's already kind of made a statement of intent. He's really shown that he knows what he's doing. And this year he hasn't. He's only played 2 games. He hasn't fired yet, but I think it's gonna. He's definitely a player that in the future can look to. Maybe even captain the Indian team or be someone in that leadership role. I think Gaikwad, he's really a really good batsman. He's got, I think there's almost like a place reserved for him in the future. When these sort of players, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma, when these players eventually retire, then players like Gaikwad, Shubman Gill, these sorts of players will step in. I think, to me, those two the players, and I'm pretty sure these three players just stand out to me. But with a lot of young players, especially in India, I think they just need to have a bit more consistency with whatever they're doing. They've had some great performances, but if they can do that more consistently, which is what the top players in the world do, then I think they'll be able to break into their international sides much quicker and be able to perform much more.
Yeah, Gaikwad is looking very good. He's a very good player, and he just has to. This season, he's been out cheaply twice, but two times getting out quickly doesn't dictate the whole season. So you just got to hope that he can continue. I haven't really got. I'm not too like versed in terms of Indian talents, but obviously Ishan Kishan. I just want him to continue what he's been doing. He's done really well this season. A good season last year. I want him to honestly. I think if he could, he seems a little bit too. He seems like sort of like a mini Virat Kohli in a way. Like very, he's quite. I think he's a quite headstrong player, but he could still be a typical captain of India as well. And he's 100% should be in the India fold and he'll be leading India's batting for many years to come. I think honestly, but yeah, that's pretty much it for our IPL segment. We're going to do talk a little bit about the Women's World Cup because Australia literally just won like half an hour ago. It was honestly an impressive batting performance from Australia. I think Alyssa Healy scored 170, which is the highest score in the 2022 World Cup. Dave, do you want to explain a bit more about how it went?
Yeah, so it started quite like for England quite poorly. They just never in their bowling they just never found any they could just never restrain the Australian batsmen. At one point they were like 250 for one, which is in the grand scheme of things, that's absolutely incredible in terms of Australia. Their batsmen, as you pointed out, Healy scored a massive 170. You had other batsmen scoring 60s, and you had 60s, 70s, 50s. There was just no batsman really misfired there for the Australians. And it was just at the end there where England really pushed it back just slightly and restricted Australia. I think they could have ended up getting 370, 380, maybe even 400. They pushed even more, but they ended up getting a 357, I think, something like that. And England, they took a few wickets at the back end, but I think it was a bit late then. And then it turned to England batting. They didn't really start very well. They just lost regular wickets there. They never really struggled with the run rate. It was just really wickets, at the end. Nat Siver, she played absolutely amazingly. Really enjoying it like Healy did. She scored, I think, 148 not out, and that is it's a real shame when you're 148 not out and you end up unfortunately losing the game. So I think England, they really just didn't really play well in terms of wickets. In terms of run rate, they did pretty well. They ended up losing by I can't remember, 70 runs or something, but that's not real concern. It's just the fact that they kept up with the run rate, but it's just wickets that they couldn't really handle.
Yeah, if you can't score a load of runs against the best team in the world, which is in women's cricket by far is Australia, then it shows, England's batting order isn't invincible. And we've seen that in the first three matches. Then we saw like a win streak of like 4. But then reality is that England aren't up to that level that Australia are. And there's a huge gap, honestly. I think everyone knows this now in women's cricket. Australia are the dominant forces in pretty much all formats. And they can literally, they've been on such a winning streak. They are rightfully the best team in the world in ODI and T20. And it's going to really take, some team needs to shape up. And for me, it's just it's the difference in fielding, honestly. Australia fielders in women's cricket are at least 5 times better than any other fielders. England women's fielders aren't very good, honestly, considering the standards they should be up to. They have not performed well in this World Cup. They might have done well in like other series, but when it really mattered in the World Cup, their fielding has been poor. Other good teams like South Africa's fielding was also very poor against England. It's just Australia just a whole nother level ahead. And if a team wants to chase them down and take over that place, they've really got to shape up. Otherwise, it's really going to be difficult for a team like England to chase Australia down because they're just so dominant in all three, in batting, bowling, and fielding. England were in the game until probably until the 10th wicket fell, which was Charlie Dean, because Charlie Dean and Nat Siver had a good partnership. They were scoring pretty well. They had kept up with the run rate, and then Charlie Dean tried to play, I think it was a sweep and just got caught. I think it was a sweep, reverse sweep, and it was just and then after that, just a few more balls, and then Shumsford got out. So all in all, England have had a good World Cup, but the huge gap between the two teams, England and Australia, this means that England have got a long way to go to chase it down. But yeah, any upcoming cricket, Zaid? Obviously, you got the IPL, but anything else apart from that?
So we recently just had the Pakistan-Australia ODI series concluding. We've got a one-off T20, which is interesting. Pakistan, pretty good T20 side actually, and ODI looking pretty strong. And Australia, it'll be quite interesting to see that. And we've got South Africa and Bangladesh going, and a few other matches, but probably the main one to look out for, IPL obviously, and the Pakistan-Australia T20.
Yeah, the Pakistan. I just don't understand the point in one-off T20. I don't get the point in series that like have even amount of matches. Like Sri Lanka do a load of like 2-test series, which just doesn't make any sense. It's sort of like you're planning so that you don't want to lose, because you're either going to lose, like if both matches aren't draws, you could just lose 1-1, and it's just a safe way of going about it. I just don't understand why 2-test match series. Just do a 3-test match series and one-off T20s. What's the point? Like, there's, if you're going to go to a country and play a match, rather than play a 3-hour match and then go back home, why don't you just why don't you play like a proper series? Isn't it? It just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you, Zaid, and yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.